Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Miguron Flix 2 in S90V and a copper carbon fiber combination. Honestly, pretty cool. They did a lot of things right here, and I want to talk about that. This knife is absolutely available in a few different forms, and it doesn't have a bad price tag at all. It's pretty impressive. I'll link it right down below. You guys can check it out if you want. It does help my channel when you use those links before you buy something, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. Thanks to Ameight and Miguron for sending this in for review. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. The box, if you're wondering, was an Ameight box, but we kind of just referred to Ameight as Miguron, and Miguron is Miguron because that's the parent company, apparently. Anyways, let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. Overall length is coming in at not quite 8 inches. In fact, quite a bit under, 7.65. Blade length is about 3 1/4 to the middle of the frame. Cutting edge is right at 3 inches. It does feel like a full-size knife, though. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against something larger. You can get all of these custom scales down in the description through either Flightanium or Original Goat. So up against the AD10, you can see it's obviously a lot smaller. Definitely more around the size of the Demco AD20.5. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Once again, closer to the size of the Spyderco Para 3. And then last but not least, I think let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. And let's do the Hogue Deca. Kind of like this one as a size comparison. Much closer to the size of the Hogue Deca and similar in overall profile, at least height, things like that, but thicker for sure. How's the action on this knife? Pretty good. We have a front flipper, and we also have this little slot here, which you can pinch it open. The detent is actually pretty good. It's clicky, and it takes a good amount of force to release it. You can actually hear it clicking away, right? So it's got a good detent, and that makes the front flipper very snappy. You can get in there and use the slot, but to be real, they should have done a couple of things. One, the blade should be slightly taller, and two, this cutout right here to access the hole, giggity, should be slightly deeper because it makes that easier. As it sits, you have to dig at it. Doing it this way is not gonna work. Pinch opening it works, but you kind of have to dig a little bit. This is one of the only disappointing features of this knife, and because it still has a reliable means of opening, I can't say, you know, oh, it's fatality, that's over, right? Or that the knife's dead because of that. No, you can still open it, right? People who don't like to use a front flipper as the primary means of deployment, you might not like this so much. But if you're used to a front flipper, which by now it's like every other person in the knife world has at least manipulated a front flipper long enough to kind of get the hang of it, then you know, you might like it a little bit more. This right here is not a deal breaker to me, but it definitely should have been cut lower so that we're not forced to use the front flipper as the primary means of deployment. Fortunately, this is tuned very well. As you can see here, usually if I can snap flip it open with the side of my index finger, which is definitely not what it's designed to do, then it makes me feel like it's tuned well enough to, you know, like anybody can open it, right? Anybody can figure it out in just a little bit. So, man, that would have been nice to just cut this a little lower, but they didn't do that, so okay. The pivot action is very smooth. It's honestly almost falls shut right out of the box, and it is very, very solid. This knife obviously runs on bearings, but if you didn't know, now you do. How about carry profile? Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's almost identical in thickness, length, and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here, this guy's really not going to be much of a bother in the pocket. It's almost exactly the same length closed as the Para 3. It's way shorter than the PM2 and nowhere near as tall as either. Very pocket-friendly knife. Materials. We have, you know, not everybody likes this stuff, but I really like the combination of carbon fiber and copper. The contrast is nice, and you get matte zones because of the carbon fiber, and you get reflective zones because of the copper. This looks good to me, and it also goes really well with blasted or orange peel or tumbled, whatever, titanium. It also goes well with blackened titanium. In fact, it goes together with a lot of, you know, anything on the gray scale, basically, and a few things that are colorful, right? In my opinion, things that are, you know, various shades of blue go really well with this. But that's just my opinion, right? You can think whatever you want. I think this is a cool material. They also make it with a silvery, I don't know what it is, if it's like aluminum carbon fiber, right? But it's something that's not copper. But yeah, this looks good, and the quality of the carbon fiber also looks good. So I kind of like that we're seeing this stuff. I don't know how expensive it is to make. Obviously, copper scales by themselves are not horribly expensive, and neither is carbon fiber. I would imagine the combination of the two is at least slightly more expensive to not only create, but then shape into a quality knife scale. So, okay, here we go. The fit and finish is very, very good. We have textured titanium. They're faux bolsters, right? Because it's actually the frame. These are just scales sitting on top of a carved out area in the frame. And then we have bead blasted S90V. What is that S90V hardened to? 59 to 61. I have to remind people because a lot of people are stuck in this zone of everything under 60 is bad and everything over 60 is good. No, that is not how that works. You've heard that because of people complaining about M390. In my opinion, and many others, the optimal zone for M390 is somewhere above 60, with 60 being, generally speaking, the bare minimum acceptable HRC, right? So a lot of people will tell you 61, 62 for M390, but that's M390, which has a different composition than S90V. S90V, which like M390 was not originally intended for pocket knives, it was intended for something else, but its optimal hardness is actually lower than S90 or M390 when we're talking about pocket knives. When it's actually being used for its intended application, it's actually quite a bit lower than that. As far as I understand, S90V, its optimal range is 59 to 61. And it will absolutely outperform M390 even when that M390 is hardened a bit higher. That's because of the composition here. S90V is a fantastic steel. It has amazing edge retention. It's still stainless, and it's tougher than I had originally thought. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a breeze to sharpen because it's not, but it is very, very good, and I like it a lot more than M390 for what I get. So when you see that S90V has been hardened to 59 to 61, don't turn your nose up at that. That's, as far as I understand, a good Rockwell hardness. So that's great that they're actually getting it there. I have a feeling that it's almost like they're there because a lot of these companies just sort of, whatever steel we're using, we're just gonna harden it to that general zone. Right? 14C28N, 59 to 61. 9CR18MOV, 59 to 61. M390, 59 to 61. D2, 59 to 61. S90V, 59 to 61. These all are fairly, they're, I mean, like, take close with a grain of salt. It's close with these steels. They just happen to be very popular steels, and this just all happens to be the same range that we keep seeing applied over and over and over again. Luckily for us, S90V is definitely the most premium of the bunch mentioned, and it also is where it's supposed to be on a pocket knife in that zone. So, did we luck out? Did they do it intentionally? I don't know. But it is good, and the price is fair, right? So there you go. Sorry, weird tangent there, but we got to point that out to keep people understanding what they're looking at here. Let's go ahead and weigh it. So the weight on this guy, and by the way, it is not milled out for weight reduction internally. So we have 4 ounces. You know what? 3 1/4 inch blade, 4 ounces, compact design. We got a lot of titanium on there. I don't really have a problem with that. Some people might do with that information what you will. The balance on this is probably going to be a bit back from the pivot, and it is, but it is, sorry, it is definitely close to the center spot on that, you know, primary index finger position. So not bad, right? It certainly doesn't feel like a heavy knife. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot is almost certainly a T8, and it is. The body screws, unfortunately, are all T6, and nope, you know what? It's just going to be 2 T6 and then a couple of T6 for the pocket clip. You obviously have one more screw holding in the inlays on either side. Some people hate that. I don't really care. Not about your opinion. I'm just saying my personal opinion is that it doesn't really matter all that much with the screws. Might have looked a little bit better had we done, you know, some titanium hardware and anodized it to sort of match the coppery color behind it, but that's okay that they didn't do it. I'm not going to complain too much. This is a pretty nice combination of materials executed pretty well, so I don't want to nitpick it. Even though I do nitpick other things sometimes. Yeah, the knife isn't going to be difficult to take apart. It's a sandwich construction titanium frame lock with bearings in the pivot. Not a lot of parts. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's measure blade stock thickness real quick. We have most likely a blade stock thickness of 120 to 125. Am I right? Yes, I am for once. 125 thousandths. So there you go. It's a good looking knife. They're definitely sticking with the same formula, right? And sometimes they do that formula and it's like, wow, that looks like literally everything else in your line. And sometimes they do the formula and you're like, yeah, it's obviously we're sticking within those parameters, but there are some nice things here. And this is one of those nice things. They kind of hit the combination of things very well. We have the busyness that looks good, right? In this case, it's the copper fiber mascus, or whatever you want to call this, right? There's just way too many syllables for me to really care about what we should call this stuff. Even if it does have its own name, you get it, right? It's a combination of copper and carbon fiber. Then we have titanium, which has been textured, and it's kind of wavy, which is cool. And then the blade is very plain. It's just a drop point blade, and it's bead blasted. It's S90V, and that's definitely the most interesting thing about the blade. I really feel like they are missing the mark here. With the finishes. Ameight/Miguron really likes a plain bead blasted finish on the blade. That's fine. That should be an option, but seriously, you guys need to add some more finishes. I can't think off the top of my head of another knife that wasn't finished this way. I mean, I see some of their budget stuff that's like black or gray. Guys, if you can clearly do a gray PVD, or I'm sorry, is it yeah, it's PVD on your Velonas, right? You can clearly do a nice tumbled finish. Once again, referencing the Velona. Offer those finishes on your premium knives. This is, it's fine. It almost looks very similar to a gray PVD. In fact, looking at it, yeah, here it is. So, no, it is not. The gray PVD right here, which is, I mean, in all fairness, it's literally just a darker finish. It has the same matteness, same reflectivity, but it would be cool to see this periodically, right? We also have a really nice satin finish, right? Some people really like the satin finishes. Keep in mind here, this is all the same company. And I have yet another one here. This one's got a nice tumbled finish on it, right? Why are all of the finishes available for the premium knives less interesting? I understand that that's subjective, but we have so many options for some of the budget knives and almost no options for the premium ones. I couldn't imagine, you could argue, well, that's the interesting element of the, of the Flix 2 here is, of course, the scale. Okay, fine, but why does that mean that we can't have, a more interesting finish on the blade? Or if you don't want me to say more interesting, because it's subjective, why not options, right? It surely wouldn't be that difficult. That's all I'm saying. If you like the way that this bead blasting works, is some sort of media blasting, then you'll be really happy with this, right? But I would really like to see some other finishes. I don't believe that it's just because it's S90V. Plenty of companies from various parts of the world have proven that you can finish S90V in a lot of different ways. In fact, Artisan Cutlery just put a mirror finish on it, like a true mirror, right? And there's plenty of companies who have done DLC and PVD and all of that stuff. So it is definitely not that, oh my gosh, it's just way too hard to finish. No, there's no way. Just refuse to believe that. So it would be nice to see some more finishes. The blade is very functional and it is reasonably thin behind the edge. The blade is also sharpened very well. My favorite thing about this knife is the ergonomics. The ergonomic lines are just great. We have a very roomy, very intentionally designed forward choil that does not confine you into a space that is uncomfortable or unsafe. The grip zones up here on the faux bolster areas are nice. It actually does provide a little bit of meaningful traction, and the rest of it is just very kind to the hand. All of these edges are nicely knocked down, so there's nothing here that feels sharp. And that pocket clip, while I think the meanest way to put it would be, well, not the meanest, right? Let's say the most passive-aggressive way to put it would be uninspired. But hey, it's functional, it works, and it's not a hot spot, right? And it's also milled. We have a full titanium backspacer, a full milled titanium clip, right? Can't turn your nose up at that. Really comfortable. It's just a shame that they made it to where you pretty much have to use the front flipper to get a satisfying deployment out of the thing. You can force it to reverse flick, but you got to dig at it, which isn't something I like to do. I like it to just be natural, right? The Detent is heavy enough that after you dig at it, you're really going to you're going to be exercising that middle finger a lot more than most people have, right? Unless you exercise it all the time, then maybe it'll be very strong. But that depends on how often you know, how often are you giving the bird to people, right? I mean, we got another problem to sort out there. But anyways, yeah, it really is a shame that that's not cut a little tiny bit deeper. Again, not a deal breaker, but man, they were real close with that. The jimping should, and I understand the jimping is just there to get a hold of the front flipper, but also it definitely should be extended out to, in my opinion, about where the swedge starts to form. Right here. Complement the index finger with some jimping back here so that the thumb has a place to gain traction. I mean, in a lot of situations where you're going to choke up, you're also going to lay your thumb here so that you can do some fine detail work. Whatever it is that you're doing, right? It's probably nice to have some traction there. So that would have been cool, but oh well. There's no lanyard hole. Who cares? Just lanyard, people. Sorry. There's, more importantly, no lefty pocket clip mounting position, which is a huge miss. We got to start doing that. Even if it's like, oh no, we have to put another hole here. Very few people will care, right? You'll make a lot more people happy, and those people will be left-handed or right-handed people who carry knives in their left-handed pocket, right? You might be saying, well, why can't left-handed people just turn it over and just, you know, have it like this? Well, that's a huge problem because a sane person, I always talk about this, a sane person will keep the pocket knife up against the back seam of their pocket for obvious reasons. You should be able to put that puzzle together yourself, right? Now, if we don't have the pocket clip mounted on this side, the blade is not pinned up against the pocket seam. It's just like this. And while it's unlikely that it will open up, if it does, that's a huge problem because where's the blade pointing? Again, there's all your puzzle pieces. You should be able to put that together. When it's mounted it's not, you know, the reason that right-handed knives, the clip is always mounted like this when it's tip up is not like, well, that's just how we do it. No, it's intentional. It's to keep it up against the back seam of your pocket like this. That's how you want it, right? You want that blade trapped in there. You don't want it opening up unless you open it. And you certainly don't want it opening up in this direction. Is that painting a picture? Baffling how many people are confused by that. I really hope that people understand that. The number of insane ways that I see people carrying knives, I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry for future you. I'm so sorry for future you. But anyways, you know, be responsible. Make good decisions. That's the message here. Anyways, the carry depth I think is just fine. It's about medium, not too much sticking up out of your pocket. In and out of the pocket will be easy because they've shaped the end of the clip like this. The surface is smooth and also contoured. That's worth pointing out. These are contoured. Seam transition from titanium to carbon fiber, copper, mascus, whatever, is very, very good. We also have a frame lock where most of the frame is covered by the scale. So while you're front flipping it, it's a lot easier to find a place that is not exposed frame lock than, you know, if the entire thing were exposed. So I like designs like this. I think that's great. We have a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop. So no worries there. And on top of that, the scale is the second over travel. No shouldering for the stop pin, but that's not a big deal. No blade play up, down, left, to right. No lock stick. No No pivot lash. I didn't check for that. Sorry. No pivot lash. And very consistent. And here, nice detent. How about centering? Centering is, that looks pretty darn good to me. So what's the price? They want $195 for this. These are made in China. I feel like most people know that. If you don't know that, now you know. As far as premium Chinese production, a lot of people just, you know, they turn the vast majority of their brain off and they say something incredibly stupid like, that's too much for a product that's made in China. Yeah. So yes, it costs less to produce things in China, but we're not comparing this to, like, you know, a Chinese knife that you'd find at Walmart. Why? Because the tolerances, the attention to detail, the overall execution, and the materials are entirely different. They also add substantial costs versus that, right? So while that is true that, you know, it costs much less to make something in China than it does, say, the United States, that's not a static comparison. It's not like all Chinese knives have to be under 50 and all American knives are over 100. That's not only wrong, that's just silly, right? I mean, you can play some circus music in the background of that quote because that's clown noise, right? No. If you were to make this exact same knife in the United States, it would cost a ridiculous amount of money to contour and shape the titanium, the carbon fiber, and the copper here, and to utilize S90V. It would be ridiculous. People would be upset about it, right? That's why we don't see that often, and when we do, it's expensive. So when you are comparing it to other appropriate, you know, companies and models in the general parameters of competition, it's actually really good. This being made by We Knives, for example, would easily cost $280 or more. Easily. You can go look at their stuff right now and find that to be true, right? Even companies like Bestech and especially Riot are just way up there. Miguron / Ameight is still a relatively unknown company, and so they're not charging for their name as much right now. I mean, is there markup? Well, absolutely. They still have to function as a company, right? But it is pretty impressive. When companies are able to do this and get it, you know, under $200, especially with S90V, I'm pretty happy. As long as the design is put together well and there's attention paid to, you know, most of the lines. If you had better access to the deployment slot, then I'm a child, sorry. Then this would have been pretty much an absolute home run, right? Also, if they had offered it in different finishes. Miguron / Ameight is once again very, very close to designing something absolutely gorgeous. And listen, guys, if you're going to stick within those parameters, right, then you got to keep delivering more interesting materials, more interesting finishes, because otherwise you're producing the same knives over and over and over again. So my suggestion would be continue to make stuff like this, offer them obviously in different scales, different finishes, right? And, you know, if you want to stay with the same formula, fine. Every now and then, explore outside of the formula. Make something weird, right? It doesn't always have to be the most ultra-utilitarian thing in the whole world. It'd be fine to make something weird. But if we're going to do something like this, then, yeah, we need, you know, variation. And obviously, we want to see if it's a feature that's meant to be utilized for deployment, then it needs to be not always perfectly optimized, but just better, right? So that it's easily accessible. This is very good, though, and the combination of things leads me to conclude that people who regularly buy knives in this territory will actually really like this knife. It's very, very nice. So generally speaking, it is recommendable, and I think you'll like it. But again, it's for more of a select group of people who are after stuff like this, right? I think the price is fair. The materials are good. The execution is good. There's just a little bit of quirkiness here. But outside of that, I mean, you're good to go. If you pick it up, if you like how this looks and the things I complained about are not big deals to you, then you will absolutely love this knife. I'll link it down in the description. Thanks again to Miguron / Ameight for sending it in. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.